Okay, listeners, I am very excited to have author, coach, leadership executive Patrick Touhey with me today. He is the author of Create Forever Teammates. That's probably showing backwards, but as you see, if you see here my classic, I have thoroughly enjoyed the book, tabbed so many great insights. I told Patrick I've already gifted this to a friend who has a daughter in high school basketball sports and was talking about challenges thereof. And I was like, oh, as a parent who is a basketball player, and I can see your passion, let me give you a book to read. And so now what I'm going to do, Patrick, is I'm going to just do my classic. I'm going to shut up and I'm going to ask you to kick us off. Tell us about yourself and why you're here today.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. And it's great. It really is great to be here. And I appreciate the opportunity. So I just want to take the opportunity to talk to the audience about what I've learned in my journey with coaching and being a corporate executive, and this idea of concentrating on relationships and connections, from an intrinsic perspective, that it seems the venue, no matter what I'm in, and I don't mean it to be as malicious by anyone, but I think culturally and societally, we've gotten so laser focused on outcomes and performance skill wise that we're stepping over some of the, jewels that bring true joy and happiness and contentment. And that is paying attention to this wonderful gift we have to be in relationships with others as we go through our life, as we go through, whether it be our work career, whether it be family, whether it be community, friends, whatever the case may be. And there's some things going on that I see that are very concerning to me. And it's a lot of work to shift what's occurring. But I feel a very strong obligation for my own life experience and what I've observed and the pain that I see out there and the lack of this consciousness around the beauty and the special gift of something bigger going on as I pursue my success, as I pursue my goals. And I want to try to help people be more conscious of that, and as a result, integrate it. And the end result could potentially be an extremely fulfilling life. So it's interesting. I would love to be able to bring people into the rooms when I do my work with young people and with professionals, when they're truly able to be honest about where they're at. And I'm talking about, highly successful individuals who feel a sense of emptiness. Now, I don't pretend to believe that it's everyone, right, or that it is everyone, but there definitely is a pendulum swing to a concerning way about, the pain that they're feeling. So I wrote this book to try to address some of that. I have a story around a very loving relationship with my brother, Kevin, who actually is the person responsible for introducing me to this work and giving me the opportunity, as I promised him while he was dying, that I would try to continue to extend his legacy.
Which I think is so beautiful. And actually it reminded me, I wanted to read, I always give comments in the intro in case we might talk about sensitive topics. So I'm going to read in the beginning of the book what you wrote about. Let me find my very first tab. Okay. It's the content warning, because what I want us to be able to talk freely about all sorts of things. So listeners, here's the content warning, both for this episode and for when you go on Amazon or to your local bookstore and buy the book, which you will. This book contains language pertaining to topics such as alcohol, drugs, suicide, cancer, suicide ideation, anxiety, death, depression, addiction, disordered eating, homophobia, abortion, self-harm, and racism. And I don't love that we have those things in the world, but we do. And a big part of this podcast and of Recovery Advocate Network is educating society about these topics. One, about how prevalent they are, every single one of them. and also reducing the stigma about talking about these, which I love throughout the book. When you're working with students, you really have, and professionals, you really master the art of vulnerability, of coming into a room where no one will look at you, make eye contact. No one wants to say anything to you. You know, they'll filter through the door while you're holding it for them and say nothing that, she said in the book, right? And then, and in many instances, depending on the dynamics or the demographics of the area, you may be completely different. You may appear completely different on the outside than what they do. And you really have mastered this special art of vulnerability, of showing what I love the phrase, to see humans as humans. The world needs to see humans as humans. And I love leaders who are working to build future leaders. I think in the past, being a leader was great and it was whatever. I just think every leader should step it up one notch and focus on the fact that you're constantly building additional leaders, which you do so much throughout the book. So, should we start first with the vulnerability component of it and how you enter that into the space and make it really a safe space by being vulnerable yourself?
Yeah, so it's really, whew, so badly needed. And I work with girls and boys, women and men, and it's interesting, the difference between the two that's potentially there. But this idea of, first of all, truly helping them to understand how courageous vulnerability is. How it is a sense of strength in that. It allows us to be so much more authentic with each other. And people talk about this, this imposter mentality, and it's interesting, Angela, because it happened in my own life. And then I'll share a really quick episode that I do to help bring down the walls and to help these people that I work with feel more comfortable. But it's really, when I introduce myself to these people I work with, I tell them that I'm Patrick Touhey, and I'm a highly successful. I'll stand on one side of the room and say I'm a highly successful entrepreneur, basketball coach, author, 37 square foot home, 3,700 square foot home, two beautiful kids, been married for over 30 years. And, that's who I am. And then I'll walk over to the other side of the room and say, I'm Patrick Touhey, a recovering alcoholic of over 30 years. I deal with bouts of depression. I have a panic and anxiety disorder. I attempted to take my life 2 times. And I am also very much that person. And then I go to the middle of the room and I tell them, based on my own experience and background and the things I had to work through, I will tell you the courage and strength that it took to work on those things that I was shameful about, that I was embarrassed about, that I hid, that I didn't want anybody to know anything about as I was moving along and succeeding. It was this idea of, it's time to stop pretending. It's time to stop being an imposter, Patrick, and it's time to start letting people know the courage and strength it takes to be vulnerable. And I am more proud of who I am in that aspect of my life and the work that I've done, and coming full circle and truly loving myself and truly accepting myself, all of me, every bit of who I am. And it doesn't mean that if you have a mental health issue or a mental illness issue, that also equates to there's no possible way you can find happiness in life. There's no possible way that you can become successful in life. And I want to really blow up that idea. And I say that from a place of confidence because I stand in front of you being that person. And I can tell you that I love myself dearly today, everything about me. And I want to help all of you the best I can, because I know how shameful it feels. I know how alone it feels, that you feel like it's not okay for me not to be okay. Um, and so therefore, and the beauty about all of it, Angela, is when they feel safe, when they're up there observing this man who's truly sharing something with them that's extremely personal, in a way that is comforting, non-judgmental. Um, it's inevitable in every session that I do. Eventually, one person will raise their hand or speak out about something that they're experiencing, and then the floodgates open. And how beautiful is it, if I may? Just this one little aspect is like, I imagine when I was a little boy, feeling so defective, feeling so stupid, feeling so ugly, feeling so, and I grew up in a very abusive home with alcoholism, and my dad was extremely physical in his abuse, mentally and emotionally. It was a difficult. There were 10 siblings. We were in poverty. There was this. It was extremely painful place to be, but just this idea, if I was that age, and I could have said, you know what, somebody else feels like this. This person over here who I thought had it all together and was, just the happiest person in the world, like I tried to be, is in the same pain that I'm in. That in itself, it seems like such a little thing, but those people that are not, that are too afraid to share in that room, the one thing that they get from walking out of the room is, I'm not alone. I wasn't comfortable with sharing, but I've been aware and made conscious for the first time, maybe ever, that there's like 10 or 12 other people that are feeling the same things that I'm feeling. And so this vulnerability is a really key thing, and it builds such trust. And I spoke to an audience of students at Shawnee High School on breaking the stigma of mental illness and mental health. And I was pretty honest with them about talking around tough things. And I don't sugarcoat it, Angela, at all. When I talk about, if we're not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and truly understanding that this is not really an exception, it's normal. It's actually absolutely normal. That who we're being and how we treat each other is so important. And the penalty is severe. The penalty is extremely sad. The consequences are dire. Um, and it ultimately leads to the potential of people taking their lives because they feel so left out, so defective. Um, I know that feeling. I know how that feels. And it's my life's passion to try to, one person at a time, be totally honest about who I am, and to be truly courageous, that I won't hide anything about all of my experiences, because I want it to be used as a platform of learning how to forgive yourself, learning how to have compassion, learning how to have empathy, learning how to have kindness, and learning how to care for others. And so that's a key when we talk about vulnerability.
I love that. We had, I'm obviously super passionate about talking openly about it. And so I've said to individuals, having been in the C-suite for, I guess, I don't know, close to 10 years now in various roles. And I've said, one of the benefits that I see and a responsibility that I see of myself is to talk to my team members and say, just off the cuff, oh, my therapist said this, right? Like the funniest thing right now is that I've been struggling with is, I've been sick and I've been struggling with fatigue. And so I was talking to my team members about it, and I was like, yeah, I said, I'm like, it has to be my thyroid. That's what it has to be. And I said, and my therapist is like, oh, it's not like you're like living 3 lives, and that you can't be Wonder Woman. It's got to be your thyroid. I'm sure that's what it is, right? And the greatest thing is I've had team members, especially in my previous role when I was out in Silicon Valley, and I talked so much about it, that came into my office and just said, thank you so much for just normalizing therapy, normalizing focusing on struggles and mental health days and those sorts of stuff. And I have team members here, my team in Atlanta, that will talk about, okay, my therapist and I were working on this, that, or the other, not to like break any confidentiality, but just, and it's the thing is that so much of what you talk about in the book, I love on my side of the world. I'm in the customer delivery. Like my role is to create, not satisfied, but raving fans of our customers, internal and external. And that means all the team members. And in order to do that, I help teach our team members how to get to know our customers as humans. Like I know several of their granddaughters' names and where they went to college and all their stories about them and their wife, at college studying outside. And it is because people, when you can see them as humans and see those intrinsic values. So I want to dig into this intrinsic versus extrinsic. So when you see these intrinsic values of each other, then you realize you don't have to shoulder the burden of struggles all by yourself. Like I
Yep.
think just understanding other people have, or in that, or just understanding the filter that other people see in the world. I mean, we just spent a day yesterday, our C-suite team building. We went whitewater rafting. Several of us have Jeeps, and so we went off-roading on our Jeeps,
Nice.
and then we sat over lunch and we told to each other our life stories. And everyone was vulnerable. And I shared about growing up in a severely abusive family. I shared about attempting suicide when I was 13 and the impact it had on me. I shared about my first child being stillborn and the impact of that. And the others shared very vulnerable things too. And we all
It's
walked
awesome.
away as a C-suite and we're like, okay, we have so much more trust and respect for each other because we all overcame. One, we're all self-made, all 4 of us, right? We had nothing to begin with, right? And so that was one of the things. The CEO was like, I love that we have this company that all of us, like, really, we did it, we're self-made, not meaning we didn't have help from mentors and stuff, but you get my point, right? And
Absolutely.
that idea of seeing humans as humans first, which I'm obsessed with the Ford method. Do you know what the Ford method
I
is?
don't know.
Okay. It's the 4 things that people care most about, and it's family, occupation, recreation, and dreams.
Love it.
So if you're working with people and you can figure out those key things, that you can build in it. And I love in the part of the book where you start talking about how if we take the time to nail this vulnerability and these intrinsic things instead of falling into the status quo of the external, like, okay, what KPI did you meet and at what time frame, and can you reduce that time, like all of those things, right? So walk us through a little bit of the work that you do to really tie into those intrinsic factors and how you overcome the human nature of a lot of type A personalities, especially people who are in sports. They're competitive, right? So they want to see that score on the scoreboard, and that's their only view of success. And I see that myself, right? I see VCs that are like, we just want to know what your annual recurring revenue is. We don't care about if
Hmm.
your team members are happy, right? So I
Yeah.
start with that as well. So walk us through how you navigate that with your
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit of what I think to be some of the problem, and then I'm going to share a real story around the transformation to intrinsic and the byproduct of that. Um, And so, Angela, when I work with all of these people, here's what I know for sure. Whether it's athletics or other endeavors, we've become a culture that is very individual focused. And when you're learning how to do whatever you're doing and mastering your craft, and a lot of the focus is around how do I succeed? How do I get ahead? How do I improve? How do I put myself in the best situation to be noticed and have exposure? And there's this really unfortunate event that's going on without really maliciously doing it or being conscious of it is how do I learn truly to connect with others intrinsically? And there's an element of selfishness to it also that occurs. So when I work with these groups, one of the first things we talk a lot about is what has your experience been in respect to where you're at today around pursuing your goals, pursuing your career, pursuing your craft. And, without question, a lot of it is, as I just explained, in their experience. So, how do we intrinsically connect to each other when we're learning something exactly the opposite of it? And what kind of skill set and emotional awareness, emotional capacity for that matter, do we have to truly be with a group of people and connect intrinsically when we're dealing with that? So once we acknowledge, or many of them acknowledge, that that's what they've experienced, then it's a process of introducing to them, what intrinsic is about, what it entails, and how to begin to build it and foster it. So I'll share a quick story with you. I was a head basketball coach for a girls team, and I had worked with these girls. I shared it in my book for a long, long time.
You can
Since
see,
they were
like, in my mind, I'm like, is this one of the stories in the book? Because you have
yeah,
so many amazing stories
yeah,
in the book. So
yeah,
I was thinking, I think I know
yeah.
which story this is, maybe not.
So I had, to be totally transparent and vulnerable, I was one of those coaches that winning is all that mattered. And I did everything possible extrinsically. And what do I mean by that? How they dribbled, how they shoot, how they passed, how they rebound, how they played defense. We were going to be the best, how we were conditioned. There was no time for anything else. That's where we had to be in order to get to where we want to get to. And that's all that matters. And we were really, really good at it. We were really, really good at it. And my daughter was on the team and her friends. And I coached them in AAU for their entire career up until their senior year in high school. The coach that was at the school retired, and he was a legend. And the community wanted me to apply for the job, so I did, and I got the job. So I'll quicken up the story. 5 games in, we're 5-0. And the 5th game, we just beat one of the best teams in the state. I was just ecstatic. I was just like so happy. I couldn't wait to get into the locker room to celebrate with the girls. And Angela, as soon as I walked in the locker room, what I saw was 12 girls bending down, untying their sneakers, taking them off, pulling their socks off. It was just another one of their 1,000th game. There was nothing else and no other attachment. Yes, we won. Yes, we're 5-0. And it was such a sad feeling for me. It was a wake-up call. Yes, I had built them to be extrinsic animals to compete with anyone, but there was no heart in the equation. There was no soul in the equation. There was no true connection between any of them intrinsically. And so my brother Kevin had been doing this work. And I called him and I said, Kev, I need your help. I can't do this the entire season. And I hired him, and he came out and he worked with the girls for 2 weeks. So what did he do to get them moving towards intrinsic? First thing he said to me was, I need 2-hour sessions, and we're going to do 2 a week, and you're not going to add them to your practice time. So you're not going to practice for 2 hours and then do my sessions for 2 hours. And that alone almost caused me to break out in hives.
I can see, I'm visualizing this in my head, and I can see the snowball effect.
There's no way in heck we're doing that, Kevin. No way we're doing that.
That's the worst idea. Never mind, we've got this. We don't need any help.
Right. So here's what he said to me, Angela. He says, well, then I'm not coming. I said, oh my God. Okay. All right. I'll trust you. So he came.
Trust. I love that you said I'll trust you, because I just want to emphasize, I'm reading right now The Speed of Trust, and trust is just at the cornerstone of this, because you have to like resist. I mean, I can think of in my own world in software, right, where I'm saying to my sales team, okay, we're implementing this new customer and we're going to do it slower than what you want, because you want it fast and you want to get to that expansion. And I need you to just trust me that by doing it slower, we will go faster.
Unbelievable. So it's so true. And so he came in, right? So here's the starting point. All right, we have to identify the problem first. Okay? So what we're going to do is work on those things that are holding us back from being intrinsically attached. What is getting in the way in your attitude, your behavior, how you're treating each other, who you're being? Let's get them up on the board. Let's just write them up on the board. And like everything else, right? Initially, it's dead silence. And then someone opens up, and before you know it, the whole whiteboard is filled with things like selfishness, judgment, cliques, drama, the hatred, envy. I had one team, I mentioned in the book that we had a gay player on the team, and the team did not accept her, didn't want her on the team. As a matter of fact, came to me and said, well, if she's on the team, it's the whole season's going to be ruined. And they begged me not to put her on the team. And I did the opposite. I put her on the team because I could use it as a lesson and an opportunity to, break that stigma around, this homophobia or other aspects of what they were afraid of. And so Kevin, brought all this out. That's the ugly stuff. And I'll tell you what, Angela, when they're done, they're drained. They are absolutely drained. Okay.
It is emotional to be vulnerable enough to say ugly stuff out loud, because you're thinking in your head, I don't want to sound like the negative person. I don't want everyone to be mad at me and wonder like, oh, are they saying, clicks and they're calling out my name, or, you're all this cognitive overload before the word gets out of your mouth. I can only imagine the physical impact.
And that's the beginning, right?
Right.
Because when it's done, what he'll do is say, look at that board. You're 5-0. You're 5-0. And you just beat one of the best teams in the state. And look at this board. And how do you feel when you see it? And it's just the look of sadness, the look of sorrow, to actually see it in writing. And he goes, today was hard, girls. I know it was. Tomorrow's going to be harder. Because we dealt with generalities today. Tomorrow, if you're courageous enough, I want you to talk about specific ways in which you've carried these things out. And let's see how it's affected everyone else. Without judgment, because we are all human. We all falter. We all have the capacity to forgive. We all have the capacity to understand that if we allow ourselves some grace, and we allow ourselves this idea that we don't have to be perfect, that we could have a really meaningful conversation tomorrow from a place of love, because love is the most powerful human emotion known to humankind. And you get to love by being authentic is one of the ways you get to love. So I just want you to know, I feel for you. I know this was hard, but tomorrow will take more courage. And that, I'm sure many of them didn't get a lot of sleep that night, but they came in the next day, and I'll tell you, Angela, and it goes, you think, okay, this one isn't going to work. Nobody's going to say anything, and we're not going to be able to get to the next stage. And without failure, real quick story. All-state football player, junior year, led the state in touchdowns. His behavior and his attitude was absolutely awful towards his teammates. Just a huge self-absorbed player. Only talked to players that could help him succeed. Bullied to a certain extent. Just a real, just not nice human being. Okay. And they were picked that next season in the preseason to win the state championship. So the exercise, like, you could feel the energy in the room that, something was going on. And how about this one? What I put out there was, who in this room needs to change the most for this team to truly reach its fullest potential in who we are as people and how we treat each other, and to establish a culture around love? Who needs to change the most? I swear it seemed like an hour, but it was 2 to 3 minutes of dead silence. And who stood up? A sophomore stood up and said, the person, Coach Touhey, who needs to change the most is that player that I just identified. And Angela, 20 more players got up after him. And if that young man was with us today, what he would tell you was that moment changed him forever. Because what hurt him most was 4 of his best friends stood up and communicated the similar type things. And so when we got there the next day, it is amazing to me how these girls were willing to give specific examples about how one girl stood up and said, I'm the 12th person on the team, and I hate every one of you guys. I try to make fun of you. I know that you've heard me from time to time. I talk about you in the hallways. I try to come up with ways to embarrass you, in ways that you wouldn't know it was me. I mean, it was just unbelievable what was being put out there. And here's the important thing, Angela, and I know you know this because of the work you do. The facilitator has to be very just non-judgmental, and really, I mean, there are guardrails, right? But in general, just let it let it evolve. Let it just, and even when you think it's almost done and that you want to interject something, okay, Patrick, just shut up right now and just let it do what it's doing. So then the next day is about introducing the intrinsic values: love, trust, selflessness, empathy, compassion, kindness, care. Okay, now let's talk about what actionable things that we can do. One is, let's set goals around what intrinsic values we want to focus on most. And let's make them 6. Let's not make them overwhelming. Let's make them 6. And then I want you to share actionable steps that you can do with each other so that we can truly begin to anchor it, begin to have different behavior and actions that we can help keep each other accountable. It was amazing. All I can tell you is it was amazing because it didn't take long. I mean, 2 games later, these girls would have run through a brick wall for each other. They hugged each other. They expressed support for each other. They were very cognizant of they were playing for a whole different reason other than winning, the extrinsic thing of winning. So what changed? Nothing changed, Angela. This team was going to be 21-5 no matter what. The only thing that changed was that we gave him a journey of joy, of happiness, of excitement, of this connection that, at the end of the day, I know that when I'm done here, no matter what success I had, I'm very clear on this. It really is going to be, Patrick, to just squander all of the people I put in your life to help them feel loved, to help them feel appreciated, to help them feel confident, to have tough love when needed. All of those things. They all came into your life for a reason. How did you do with that? I see all the trophies. I see all the $1 million company you established and sold. I see all that. Wonderful, wonderful things, beautiful goals that you accomplished. Pale in comparison. Pale in comparison. One more quick story about that I know it pales in comparison is, and it is in the book. My father always told me I would amount to nothing. So it's similar to this. It's similar to this journey the girls were on. There's definitely parables between it. So you'll amount to nothing. You're stupid. All of those things. You hear those long enough, and you're going to start believing that. I had a head coach in high school. I was a sophomore, who pulled me out of class one day, unconditionally expressed to me how much he loved me, how smart I was, how talented I was, just how just awesome I was as a person. Nothing to do with basketball. And I can remember that incident, Angela, and thinking, why is this man even saying these things, to me? He's not even my father. Has nothing to do with basketball. And I didn't get it right away. He planted a seed. He really just planted a seed. And I struggled. Along the way. But I know that moment, there was the first time that a man expressed to me that he loved me, that I was special. And so this scar of mine was so deep. I began to formulate that if I just become successful, Patrick will finally be happy. Patrick will finally find joy. I don't know. I know for me that I pursued it viciously, and it was driven by fear, and it was driven by proving my father wrong. And my whole self-worth and my whole identity was connected to that pursuit of succeeding. And I didn't know it at the time, but I sold that company for a lot of money. And I looked up into the sky and I told my father that I did it. I told you so. I told you I would do it. I told you I would be able to succeed. And I was happy for about 3 to 4 days. And then I went into this deep, dark depression because my whole identity was sold. Why wasn't I happy? Why wasn't I joyful? Why wasn't I proud of myself? You know why, Patrick? You didn't do it on purpose, but there's a wounded person that you have not attended to. He's still there. He's still there. While you were pursuing all of these material things that only last so long, there was this wounded part of who you were that was screaming out, what about me? What about me? I also sold myself out in some of my values to belong while I was pursuing that success. And in my gut, I knew those were not me, and I knew those were wrong, Angela. Yet here I was engaging that with my peers, with my coworkers, in doing things that were just not aligned with my spirit, my soul, my authentic self. and yet once again falling further and further apart from whom I truly was. And I woke up about 4 or 5, 6 months down the road from the sale of that company in a major panic attack at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And there's nothing that I could feel more empty or sad about that as I woke up and I was experiencing this major panic, that I reached over to my wife to wake her. And the thought went through my mind, Angela, she's not going to be able to help me. She's not going to be able to help me. There's nobody that's going to be able to help me. And so the only thing to do, Patrick, to relieve this is to take your life. And I got up and I went into this medicine cabinet, and I had been taking Xanax, sleeping pills, antidepressants, and I just put them all in a bag and went downstairs, got my car keys, got into my car, and pulled out of the driveway, started taking, I was going to go to a remote location. And I looked back at the house and I said, at a moment of clarity, you can't do this to your family, Patrick. Then I turned around and I went inside and I sat downstairs until my wife got up. She came downstairs and I said to her, I need to go to the hospital. She goes, why? What's wrong? I said, I will most likely take my life if I don't go. And when I stepped out of the elevator on the 6th floor of the psychiatric ward at Elkhart General Memorial Hospital in Elkhart, Indiana, I had two feelings. One was relief, and the other was the beginning of stopping to pretend, and that it's okay not to be okay, and that vulnerability is a beautiful thing. Didn't come right away, but as I began to do what the work I needed to do, that's what happened. So this idea of how important is intrinsic in the equation of human life, in our relationships, I really believe it's something that we need to spend a lot of time talking about, discussing, collaborating in ways and examples such as the one you shared, Angela. And I think that's a beautiful thing that happened when you're all sitting down and you're willing to put it on the table and you're willing to share. That's love. That's intrinsic. That's connection. And I tell CEOs who this is all uncomfortable about that, okay, this is not why I do this work, but I will guarantee you that if this becomes part of your culture, the byproduct will be a bunch of passionate people who love each other and will run through a brick wall for each other and who will perform at a very high level. That's exactly what will occur, because I see it happen time and time again. So it's, you look at, if I could just say one more thing, I tell the people I work with, it's not if we get really bad. It's not if it gets so bad that we're totally off course and we're totally lost. You only have to look at leaders that we have right now who have exposure to millions, and look at the example that's being set around desensitizing the idea of core values, of common decency, of being of service and selflessness, about caring for others. It's not, everybody, I want you to know that that's not okay. That's not okay. It's far from being okay. It's far from being okay. And if we think for a second that young people observing this, that there isn't a percentage of those that are saying, oh, this is how things are, this is how you go about doing things, this is how you treat others, it's very alarming to me, and it's very concerning to me. And it really is an indication of how lost we have gotten. I also know there's a lot of people in the world who are committed to getting back on course. People like yourself, people like me. There's a lot of them. and there's a bunch of young people. So I'm very optimistic. I know that side sounded dark, but I'm also very optimistic that this will shift and that it will change. And that to me is exciting.
I love everything you just said. And I just strongly believe when, I was telling you earlier, I was reading the book Speed of Trust by the younger
Yeah.
Stephen Covey. And so much of it talks about even just sticking to your core values. And if your team members know that, so I think I'm more than comfortable for my team members to get on the podcast. And I think I know exactly what they would say. Like, we know how Angela's going to react to this. We know what she's going to do. She's very predictable and whatnot. And they're like, we know we can offer some extra service to the customer because Angela's going to back us up because that's what we need to do to take care of the customer. And it talks about us as leaders. We need to take a step back and say, okay, if we're not in the room and individuals are talking about challenges and how much they trust you, like, where are your core values in there? And pausing to figure out what's your life mission statement. What does success look like for you at the end? We have this joke. We're going to do this C-suite bingo cards for our team members. And then every time we say our repeatable phrases, like, I'm passionate about, I'll tell you 2 reasons for this. Okay. I'm passionate about people remembering the key things I want them to remember. So I will purposely say them over and over. And I love the fact when they're quoting my words back to me about, these things, right? And it reminds me back, my daughter's 21 now. So back on Mother's Day when she was like 9, maybe, 8 or 9, we were listening to the Fish on the radio, and they were having people call in and say, what are some things that your mother used to always say? That adage was, my mom used to always say, don't go outside with wet hair or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so my daughter's in the back seat, and I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder what she's going to say. Like, my daughter's really slow. She's special needs. And I thought she's probably going to say, you always say, hurry up. Or you always say, brush your teeth and brush your hair or something like that. I thought, and I asked her, I was like, okay, if they're asking you, what would you say that I always say? And she said, I would say, you always say, I love you. That's it. And I was just like, yes. But I also decided at that moment in my life, I wanted to purposely repeat phrases that I wanted her to remember. Like, anything worth doing is worth doing well, and some of these phrases, and I just wanted those to become in their core. So when I think in the work environment and having these healthy things, reminding people, okay, wait, what's our core basis? Once again, we're not creating satisfied customers. We're creating raving fans, right? We care about them as we don't care about the actual deadline that's going to have our immediate ROI. We care about the fact they're super successful when they walk away. And as I told one of my customers, I want you to be happier after you sign the contract than you were on the day you signed it, right? I want you to be, yes, exactly. And so really understanding and having those as a core thing. I talked with the CEO that I built my previous software company with recently, and I was like, okay, tell me all the horrible things that I used to drive you crazy as your COO, right? And he wouldn't give me candid feedback. I'm going to have to continue to nag him for it to get him to give it to me, because I know there are things that were, and maybe time heals all frustrations, maybe. But he said to me, is a reminder of this, and I want listeners to realize this. He said to me, when you were at Florence, you were so adamant about taking care of customers and taking care of employees. And he said, every time I tried to cut corners to save money or to do something faster, to take away that customized approach or whatnot, you just were so adamant. You're like, no. And he said, we were so grateful for that, because that solid base in our culture got us through so many hard times. And I think, to me, that understanding of who you are as your core values, teaching and building teams that can have those, that girls team that you're talking about, right? They could have gone into the next season and lost all the games, but they would have been all in it together. No doubt. I love the part of the quote that you share in your book. Now I got to find it in my notes, is a couple of things. Is talking about relationships. So on page 166, when you say, you try and ask the question, what's the most significant gift you're receiving from being a part of this team. And all the times you've done that kind of work, you've never received the answer you're looking for, which is relationships. But that is it. That's where you find the joy, the passion, and what success looks like in the end is relationships. And then I also want to tie to on page 160, you said, as humans, we're constantly searching for something to fill a void or get us through the day. But love is free and your heart was given to you. It's something that has the ability to change your life within us. So if you can only take one teaching away from the book, it is to love. The rest will follow. And I think that is what you're sharing with these team members. You're teaching them how to love each other as their unique human individuals.
Yeah, no question, Angela. And I remind them all the time that you're beautiful and you're special, and your soul is just so precious for who you are as a person. That's it. You were born with such beauty. There's nothing that needs to be done or nothing that needs to be achieved to validate that. And that is the truth. That is the truth. Every one of you in this room is of unbelievable specialness, value, and love. And this idea that I just really want to share with you that I got lost along the way. And I thought performance, and I thought accomplishments, and I thought achievements were what I needed to validate those things. And that's when it was never enough. There was never enough. And when those achievements came, it had to be something else. And so if you can just for a minute, what Patrick Touhey has worked very hard on is self-love and self-compassion, because I was so very brutally hard on myself. I took the hammer out many times. I was so unforgiving of anything that I failed at, made a mistake at, or did wrong. And it just deepened the divide between my true heart and my true self in respect to who I was, as I've described to all of them. And I had to work my way back to that. I had to spend time intrinsically, quieting myself so that I can take a look at, what is it about Patrick Touhey that I could tap into in stillness and quietness and getting to my heart to begin to love Patrick. Every morning, Angela, I go to my heart, and I call it heart focused breathing. And there's many mornings where I visualize myself I close my eyes and I visualize myself running through the fields, jumping, playing, laughing, and I go to that part of me and I just tell them how special. I tell him how special he was and how he's always been special, and how creative he was to survive, the chaos, the abuse, how he figured out ways to manage it. Now, some of them didn't serve me well now, but they served me well back then. They protected me. Patrick, I'm so appreciative of that. I'm so thankful that you did that. That wasn't someone who was stupid or not capable. That was very creative of you. That was very, very intuitive of you. Man, you had such courage to figure it out. How do I get through this war that I live in? And you did that. And I just love you and thank you for that. And, slowly but surely, Angela, I found this true acceptance of how special I really am and how much I do love myself it gives me the freedom to go, you know what? It gives me the freedom to play. It gives me the freedom to fail. It gives me
The
the
freedom to
freedom.
fail is so huge.
Yeah. 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 And
So
it's,
huge.
yes, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. When you could
Absolutely.
just say, alrighty, I'm a big believer, and I say in my company all the time, we're going to try an experiment with this because people understand the ideas. Not all experiments work, and so in change management and some of these where we're not sure which path, I'm like, okay, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to try this as an experiment, and it can fail. And that is beautiful. I mean,
Yep.
you could just be like, okay, never mind. That didn't work. We'll try again. Let's go in a different direction.
Can you imagine if you woke up every day and said, you know what, I'm going to play life today. I'm going to play.
Right?
I'm not
Wow.
going to work it. I'm going to play it. I'm going to play. When I go to the office today, I'm going to play. I'm going to explore. I'm going to try. I've got this thing I want to achieve, but that everything I do and experience along the way, I want to look at it with curiosity and just adventure. And no one has to tell me to be driven. No one has to tell me that I'm not pursuing what I want to pursue. I do. No one has to remind me of that or put me in my place around that. But if my attitude and behavior can be run around just, damn, I'm going to play this thing, man. I'm going to play this thing. And all of a sudden, right? It changes the whole, I'll tell you something else. I mean, you get to places because your whole self opens up. The clarity, the ability to tap into creativity. This is what I tell these players are so afraid to fail. They're so afraid to fail. They're so afraid to make a mistake. They're so afraid to flunk the test. And as a result of it, it's when I say to them at times, let's try to shift this to play. They look at me like, you're crazy, man. You are crazy.
We all are just a little bit, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And
But
so,
when you talk about like this mentality of coming into play, I have another coach that I know who uses this idea of someone who's a room tilter, someone who walks into the room and people just want to gravitate towards them. And I
yeah,
think people want to gravitate towards someone who is coming to work to play, who is
yeah,
coming in to just be passionate and explore new things. And people want to be around that individual. And if people
yep.
want to be around you, the collaborative work that you can do together just by bringing that spirit, no one wants to. I mean, I love Eeyore in the back of yours. I had Eeyore when my daughter was young, and I used to sing. It played music, and it was like, looks like rain, wait and see. Looks like rain, wait and see. Likely rain all
Yeah.
over me. Back in my gloomy day, right? So now everyone knows that I'm going to stay as a podcast host and not a singer. But anyway, the point is, no one really wants to be around that individual. And we find ourselves walking into the office with these looks on our face and this dread. And we're thinking about all of our meetings and we can't wait to the weekend. But wow, if you walk in and say, today,
Yep.
I get to play. Just that whole change. It's like the science is, if you just force yourself to smile, your whole mood changes
Yeah.
by that smile. So even if it's like, hey, just continue. I think from the therapy that I've done has said the exercise that you do, which I love, is like talking to your younger self, talking to your inner child.
Yep.
And at first it probably felt super awkward and
No doubt.
stupid.
No
I mean,
doubt.
when my therapist said to me when I was in treatment from PTSD from my kidnapping, and they were like, we're going to do inner child work. Well, I was severely abused as a child. I don't want anything to do with my inner child. Like, no, we are not. We had this joke that I said, my inner child is like, we had these little figurines. I was like, mine's down that like water well. I don't want to deal with that. Right. But so it was super awkward. But sometimes doing the awkward and trusting the process and just doing it repeatedly, wow.
Yep.
Then one day you're like, I believe this.
So I'll share this with you real quick, and it was really hard, but I think your audience will appreciate it. So when I was truly able to shut this off up here, right, the brain, the mind, and truly get to the heart, Um, what I saw was really hard to see. Um, and so what I saw, Angela, was me. I'd put me at probably the age of 11 is what I would have guessed. Um, but crawled up, shaking in a dark cave, um, loaded with fear, um, just feeling, so just almost like would use the word, disgusted or disgusting. Um, so if I could say this for a minute, I talked earlier about as I was pursuing my success, my authentic, myself that was hurting was still there. Um, and that's where I left him. Didn't want to see him. I don't want to see that anymore. I'm running from that. See, I'm getting all of these achievements to change that. Don't ask me to go back to that.
Right.
I don't want to go back to that. But what I needed to do was it gave me the opportunity to stand in front of that very hurt part of me, say I'm not going anywhere anymore. I'm here, and I'm here to love you. I'm here to love you unconditionally, Patrick. I'm not going anywhere. And slowly but surely, that 11-year-old stood up, moved slowly out of the cave, out into the open, as I kept attending to it and loving it, to the point that I see it running in the fields and jumping around and running to me and hugging me. And that was the evolution of taking the time to do that. I tell the people I work with the secret sauce of contentment, peace, happiness, and a knowing that all is okay in those very hard moments in our lives and this adversity that we reach. The secret sauce in your journey is simply this: what are you doing to feed yourself as much self-love as you possibly can? Because when you can get to that point, and it's a lifelong journey, but those are the things, that is the exercise, that is the secret sauce, that you wake up every day and you feel vibrant and you feel happy and you feel joyful and you feel tired and you feel exhausted and you feel sad and you feel all of those things, but
But
you
you
know it.
feel you're not numbing it
Yes, you're
anymore.
not numbing it, and you know that I'm okay. I'm okay. And isn't it wonderful that you don't have to numb it anymore, Angela? Isn't it?
Exactly.
It's just,
Absolutely. I've been there, done that so many different ways. Okay, Patrick, is there
yep.
anything you really hoped we would cover today that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah. There's three things that I would like to just put out there, that if you can establish these three things in your culture and working with others, and even individually working with someone, the three things that I believe most human beings desire most is: one, love, which we've talked a lot about; appreciation; and inclusion. If you can keep those three things present in mind in who you are and how you behave and how you reach out to others, it will be an amazing life for you.
That is beautiful. And it's love, appreciation, and inclusion for yourself and for those around you that you're building a relationship for. And I truly believe, I think you said this in the book, you really can't give that to other people if you haven't really absorbed it and given it to yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's a
Absolutely.
requirement of this podcast that everyone share their favorite motivational quote. What is yours, Patrick?
So I learned this quote in AA many, many
Love
years
it.
ago. And it's the quote is, "To thine own self be true." And it was initially comes from Shakespeare, but "To thine own self be true." And I
I love that.
try to do that every day. I want to be in my values. I want to be who I am. I want to love everything about who I am, and I want to be true to that. I don't want to hide anything anymore. I don't want to be careful anymore. I am who I am. You know what? With the wonderful thing, other than it, you get me going on. The other thing about self love
What?
is. Don't get me wrong. I'm very appreciative, and it's very wonderful to hear from others. That you're loved, and that you're appreciated, and that you're wonderful. But it's also so awesome not to have that, because you give
Not
it
to
to
need
yourself.
it.
Not to
Yes.
need it. Very good, because you already to thine own. You've been true to yourself, Patrick. You've taken care of yourself. You've really paid attention to what's good for your soul, what's good for your heart, and just how special you are. So to thine own self be true helps me get there, and I try to do that every day.
Well, Patrick, I love everything you said today. This was amazing. This was so powerful. And listeners, he shared a couple of stories in the book, and it should tease you to know that you're going to get so much value out of this book. As I shared, I bought a copy and gave it to a friend who has a daughter in high school. And I was just like, okay, you need to listen, you need to read this, because it will help you revolutionize the way you think about some of these things. And here's the kicker: you actually grow so much yourself personally and in your life, which is such a beautiful. So I encourage everyone to, all the links to Patrick's website and the book will be in the show notes, and how you can follow him and do all those things and stay in tune with all the amazing work that he's done. I highly recommend that you follow him on social media. He shares some amazing stuff that will be very useful to any leader, team member, individual. So make a moment to do that. And thank you so much, Patrick, for spending time with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Angela. And by the way, you are awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Awesome. I will take that. Thank you. And you're amazing as well.
And all the work you're doing and all the people you're helping. And boy, I'll tell you, I have such admiration and respect. So you have a beautiful heart.
Thank you. Now I'm going to get all teary-eyed. These are not tears. Yeah, these are definitely tears. So I'm not going to lie, they're not tears. I'm really grateful for that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.